Hey everybody, Wayne here with the On the Blue Line podcast. This week we talk about Hurricane Ian and life lessons we can learn from hurricanes. The On the Blue Line podcast starts now. Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for listening to this, watching this. I don't know if you're on YouTube or how you're connecting with the content, but thank you so much. Sorry we're a day behind this week, just trying to get caught up on content. As many of you know, if you've been following us on social media, we are based out of the state of Florida. And as you've seen all over the media, the Hurricane Ian did come through the state of Florida last week. Very fortunate in the area that I am located and many of us associated with On the Blue Line are located. It actually went quite a ways further south than where we are at. However, our hearts definitely go out to those who are down in South Florida and all of the officers that are down there helping try to get these communities pieced back together. And I know there's officers from all over the state. In fact, the other day I was on the phone with a small PD out of the Panhandle, and they were sending officers down there. So I know for sure that officers are going down there from all over the state to try to help rebuild, restore, and keep them safe in the meantime. So thank you, and our thoughts and prayers are with all of you who are out doing that. This is the 123rd episode of the podcast. So I hope that you are enjoying that. This is going to be a little bit different format, and it's going to be a little bit shorter, partially because we are running behind, and I just wanted to get some content out to you. So I'm not going to do any news stories this week, and I'm not going to do the one crazy takeaway. Definitely check those out in the previous episodes, and next week I'll come back to you with our normal format. If you are not in our Facebook group, the On the Blue Line community, you can just search for it. It's On the Blue Line community in Facebook. If you're not in there, be sure to be in there and join. And I would love to see you. It's open to all law enforcement and law enforcement supporters. And in there, I put a poll that I would like to get your feedback on, pretty much asking about the format of these different podcasts and some different things that we're working on. So if that's something that interests you, definitely join the Facebook group. It's On the Blue Line community, and in there I will interact with you and hopefully get your feedback on some of the content and so forth that I'm putting out. So that's all I got on that. Last week was the Dylan Roos episode. I got some good feedback. The only quote unquote negative feedback I received is it does have some language in it. So if that is something, if you've got young ones around, whatever, I do apologize. But we talk about real subjects. It's adult subject matter, and sometimes the language is a bit much, which may have been the case in that episode. But just know that in general, I try to keep them pretty clean, but I never in any way going to edit guests when it comes to how they speak or what they're saying, because I think it's important to get all these differing viewpoints and to just bring you the quality interviews with these people. So definitely I've gotten some really good feedback on that episode as well, where we talk about masculinity. So check it out and then tell me what you think. Be sure to leave a comment and be sure to like it, and I would greatly appreciate it. And remember, everything is available on video at YouTube and on Rumble as well. This Thursday, I'm going to have a brand new episode for you, so be looking out on social media, and I will get that to you, a new episode of The Interview Room this coming Thursday. All right, the one takeaway that I wanted to go over this week is when I was sitting in my vehicle, watching raindrops hit the car and watching the wind blow palm trees around, I got thinking about hurricanes and hurricane responses, and rather than talk about specifically hurricane responses, because most of you, a lot of you don't even live in the state of Florida, I really thought, there are some lessons that came to mind as I was sitting there in my car that I jotted down in a notebook, as far as things that really apply to other areas of our lives when we talk about responding to and preparing for catastrophes, right? It doesn't matter if you're talking about a hurricane, if you're talking about any other type of act of God. It just comes down to being prepared and different steps that we do to prepare, and then how we can apply those to our lives. So I just want to run through these real quick with you. My first one is, you have to be prepared, but you have to be prepared to change, right? And I think that's a lesson that we saw, sadly, the negative effects of that played out. And obviously, sometimes there's nothing you can do. You can be as prepared as possible and believe one thing's going to happen. And then, like what happened with some parts of South Florida, the storm moved at the last moment and they had no warning, minimal warning that it was going to do that. So I know for where I am in this part of Florida, we at one point thought it was coming straight here, and then it ended up turning and going down south. And again, this isn't specifically about those hurricanes. This is about this idea, right? How many times in our lives do we either fail to plan, or we plan and the minute we have to adjust, things go into a tailspin? I know if you're anything like me, and you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, we have moments where we do one of two things, right? Whether we're starting this podcast or other businesses and stuff that I've been involved in, we either don't spend enough time planning and getting ready for the eventual what could happen, both positive and negative, or we make a plan and then things don't go as we think they should go. And all of a sudden, we end up in a total tailspin, and it just puts us in an area where we're like, well, I don't know what to do, right? And it just, we are not prepared for the inevitable eventuality that things are going to change. So that's something that we control, right? And that is something that we can work on. So that was one of the ideas that came to me, and I wanted to give you some thoughts on that. Another one is that response to tragedies must be ordered. This is kind of that smooth is fast principle, right? So often when we're responding to maybe a critical incident or we're taking action with something in our lives, we get all excited, or we don't take a moment, right, to stop, to breathe, and then to consider the ordered steps that we should take in order to take action. And because of that, again, sometimes it's that failure to create a plan. There's no plan in general. So if you have no target and you're trying to hit said target, well, you are going to hit it 100% of the time, and that's nothing because you have no target. And that is what we end up doing when we don't take time to plan. And then secondly, we don't take time to think through our plan of attack once an incident happens. What are we going to do? What are the steps, right? If you are responding to a tragedy or an act of God like a hurricane, then you're preparing in advance. You hold, right? There is a period of time, especially with something like a hurricane, where once that thing starts hitting, there's nothing you can do. Like once the sustained winds reach certain miles per hour, most places pull everyone off the roads. And at that point, it's really just up to God. You are going to wait this thing out, and then you're going to take action once it passes. And then in those moments after, what do? Well, you prioritize life, then property. Then, you go down this hierarchy of what are the needs and what do we need to do to be the most effective in this moment? And when can we start taking action? Well, it's no different in our lives, right? We say we want to make a plan and we need to do this, and then all of a sudden we don't stop. Maybe we get all overwhelmed. We don't think through the processes that are required to our actions when we get ready to take action on a particular subject. So that's something I want to encourage you about this week as well. And then lastly, the third idea that I wanted to bring to you that came to me was that all emergencies have a potential to bring out the best in people or the worst in people. And we know this to be true. In fact, the governor is famously put out across different social media accounts, and a lot of the legacy media picked up the story as well, where he had called out and said, hey, remember, we're a Second Amendment state, so don't be looting these properties and so forth. But why did he have to put that out? Why on day one were they talking about the frauds that are typically perpetrated during these type of events? It's because they do both, right? These types of emergencies bring out both the best in people, like what you're seeing with the response of the community and law enforcement and nonprofits and, people trying to help each other. And you have all these images of carrying people through the water and saving animals. And that is awesome. That's what you want. But at the same time that you're seeing the very best of humanity, you're also seeing the worst of humanity. And that's the concern, right? That is this fear that, well, just because something is happening in our lives, we still have a choice. So when things are not going as they should, or if we face a tough time, or if we face a setback, or if we face a loss, whatever it is in our personal lives, we can apply that same thing, that every one of those setbacks, emergency situations can bring out the absolute worst in people, including ourselves. But it can also bring out the best in people. And you know whose choice that is? Well, it's yours, and it's mine. So those were the three things I wanted to go over with you this week that it kind of came to mind. Hopefully you find those helpful. Again, not really applying to the hurricane as much as they are to our personal lives, that so often the same responses that are effective to bringing aid to a community or to the way we do this job is the same way that if we would use and approach everyday things in our lives, the better off we would be and the better our response would be to those situations. So I hope that was helpful. I'll be back with the full morning roll call next week. That does it for this week's morning roll call. Remember, the interview room releases on Thursday, but in the meantime, I'll see you out there on the Blue Line.